the Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Bernard Gomou, Prime Minister, Head of the Government of the Republic of Guinea, a request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have the great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Bernard Gomou, Prime Minister, Head of the Government of the Republic of Guinea. I invite him to address the Assembly.
Monsieur le Président,
President, Excellencies, distinguished heads of state and government, distinguished heads of delegations, distinguished Secretary General, ladies and gentlemen. As I begin my remarks, I wish to express the warm congratulations of His Excellency Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, President of the National Council of the Assembly for Development, CNRD in French, President of the Transition, Head of State, Supreme Head of the Armies, upon your successful election to preside over the 77th regular session of the General Assembly of the United Nations. I wish to pay a well-deserved tribute to your predecessor, His Excellency, Mr. Abdallah Shahid, for the outstanding work during his mandate. Furthermore, I wish to express the appreciation and the deep gratitude of the Guinean authorities to the Secretary-General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his dynamic conduct of his mandate. President, ladies and gentlemen, the participation of the Guinean delegation at this meeting makes it possible to contribute information on the situation of our country and our appreciation of the international situation. The Republic of Guinea, after having set the tone of independence in Africa, particularly in French-speaking countries, has nevertheless experienced dark moments in its governance, and unfortunately, the regime that was in place during the previous decade was no exception to the rule. This period was particularly marked by an extreme politicization of state bodies, violations of the rule of law, and financial mismanagement. Ultimately, the constitutional change removing term limits on the presidential mandate, limiting it to 2, by the previous president, was the factor that triggered social-political troubles in a nation where development was already paralyzed, even though it is the first producer of bauxite in the world. Faced with this catastrophic situation and the need to stop the excesses of those in power, the forces of defense and security, brought together in the National Council of the Assembly for Development, decided as an expression of solidarity to take the responsibility on September 5, 2021, in order to set up a virtuous government that would be to the advantage of the Guinean population, particularly women and young people, with the objective of inclusive and sustainable development. The population supported these ideals and expressed their expectations in meetings between the CNRD and the dynamic forces of the nation, An overview of the situation was made in order to agree upon appropriate solutions for the challenges and to make the country recover. And the objectives were institutional correction to build strong, legitimate institutions able to stand the test of time and temptations of people. Refounding the state to have ethics in public life and restore the state authority. Recovery in order to break with the old practices for reform, modernization, and a renewal of the administration. A rally of the people as a whole in conducting public affairs in full transparency and respecting all commitments on the national and international levels. In this dynamic, the following progress was made. Drafting and publishing the Transition Charter, creating a civilian transition government, establishing the National Transition Council, CNT in French, establishing the Court for Economic and Financial Offences to combat corruption and the diversion of public goods in order to reestablish trust between the population and those in power. All proceedings are based on the full independence of the justice system. This is why the President of the Transition stressed when he took power that justice would be the guide, the compass for the life of our nation. National conventions entitled Days of Truth and Forgiveness were organized. A report was submitted by these conventions on 24 August 2022. The head of state made me responsible for disseminating, implementing, and following up the recommendations from these Truth and Forgiveness Days. An inclusive consultation framework was established with the support of technical and financial partners. This is a platform making it possible for all actors in society to have exchanges on the conduct of the transition. President, ladies and gentlemen, for the transition to be an inclusive, peaceful framework, the aforementioned institutions, in the exercise of their respective mandates, sent missions to the interior of Guinea and outside it as well to gather the opinion of Guinean citizens on the management of the transition and the country's future. A proposed timeline was reached through consensus in order to spare the people of Guinea from falling back into cyclical transitions. When it comes to the length of the transition, a central negotiation point between the Republic of Guinea and the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, it should be stressed that the content of the transition includes 10 points covering a general census of the population and housing, as well as a civil status administrative census. These two operations will need 24 months to be held, and 12 additional months will be necessary for the holding of 3 programmed elections. I cannot stress enough the imperative need to conduct quality censuses in order to draw up an incontestable electoral register which will guarantee transparent electoral processes and results which are acceptable to all. In this regard, it should be recalled that the issue of the electoral register was always a point of disagreement and led to different elections in recent years being contested. In the framework of the policy of reaching out, the President of the Transition created the framework for inclusive inter-Guinean dialogue, which has been placed under my authority. It is our hope that reluctant stakeholders will feel a jolt of patriotic awareness and join the dialogue. It is important to stress that with no pressure whatsoever, the members of the CNRD, of the government, and of the National Transition Council decided of their own free will that they would not run for office during the upcoming elections. This decision is constantly reaffirmed. In terms of justice and human rights, the Ghanaian government, in its respect for human rights, has, besides the ongoing judicial reforms, made organizing the trial for the events of 28 September 2009, during which there were victims, a national priority. In this regard, the President of the Transition decided to organize, after precisely 13 years of waiting, the opening of this trial in cooperation with the International Criminal Court and the Human Rights Council. On the economic front, strong measures were taken in order to stabilize the macroeconomy to strengthen Guinea's resilience. A program of interim reference for 2022-2025 will definitely contribute to improving living conditions for our population. We wish to reassure all public and private investors of our government's will to guarantee favorable conditions for doing business. An overhaul of public finance and reforms in the mining sector, particularly setting index prices for bauxite, will make it possible for the population to benefit from the dividends of growth in the bauxite sector. We commit ourselves to a careful consideration of the problems which the people of Guinea face in order to find lasting solutions to them. Hence, the imperative need to establish the rule of law and strong institutions for a successful transition, a clear measure of Guinea's stability and, by extension, the stability of the West African sub-region. We will also continue to cooperate with all our partners, respecting our commitments with an open mind marked by mutual trust and respect. President, ladies and gentlemen, the 77th regular session of the General Assembly of the United Nations is taking place at a time when the world is facing challenges of many social, political, and economic kinds at the dawn of a new multipolar world order. The theme chosen, a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges, challenges all countries of the world to more united action and solidarity in order to resolve the complex challenges generated by the COVID-19 crisis and crises affecting regions providing basic foodstuffs, agricultural inputs, and oil and petroleum products. In this regard, Guinea appreciates the Secretary General's initiatives for peace and international security, as well as a path to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Guinea also calls for the need Guinea also recalls, rather, the need to redouble efforts for these initiatives to succeed, resorting to preventive diplomacy, respect for human rights, international solidarity to combat climate change, and debt relief for the least developed countries. President, ladies and gentlemen, my country shares the concerns of the international community on issues of peace, security, development, and human rights, which our organization considers. Guinea renews its traditional position on the search for peaceful, consensus-based solutions to these issues. My country avails itself of this opportunity to stress, when it comes to peace operations, that the Republic of Guinea has deployed since 1961 and continues to deploy contingents of troops and of police in different peace missions throughout the world. On the basis of this experience, the President of Guinea, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, decided, besides the Guinean troops of MINUSMA in place since 2013 in Kidal, Mali, to deploy an additional contingent of troops to replace the Benin contingent, the mandate of which will conclude in 2023. Furthermore, Guinea reiterates its commitment and stresses the need for combating climate change and irregular migration. President, ladies and gentlemen, we are convinced that our organization is indispensable in today's world. Nevertheless, it deserves to be reformed in order to be more fair, more inclusive, and ready to respond to the legitimate aspirations of the peoples of the world. The United Nations should adapt to the world's realities, respond to the many challenges which humanity faces, and retain its central role in world governance. In this context, the Republic of Guinea values the application of the Azouini Consensus and the CIRT Declaration, which express the shared African position as declared by President Macky Sall, the President of Senegal, and of the African Union on Security Council reform. From the same perspective as our universal organization, the Republic of Guinea has adopted as leading principles for this transition inclusive dialogue, including with ECOWAS, strengthening the rule of law, promoting human rights, and ensuring accountability to mend our torn social fabric. On behalf of the population of Guinea, we thank our partners for their support in this process, particularly the United Nations system and bilateral and multilateral funding partners. Lastly, my country reiterates its support for multilateralism, for multilingualism, for the revitalization of United Nations bodies, another asset for inclusive international cooperation in solidarity and to our mutual advantage, serving humanity and the sustainable development that member states so prize and desire. God bless Guinea. God bless Guineans. God bless our planet. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister, Head of the Government of Republic of Guinea, for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.